Okay, so we are recording. Would you like the intro?
This is the Frontline Activist Movement podcast. I'm Prince. This is Diamond Rose. Matter of fact, I'm gonna let Diamond Rose tell y'all what's going on right now.
Today we have an interview with Open Vallejo's Geoff King. So we have him here today. He's joining us on a Zoom call, and this is just a standard interview. Geoff, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you.
It is a pleasure of ours. We're very honored for you to come in and talk with us today. We have a lot of questions for you, so hopefully it won't take up too much of your time. And let's get it started.
Okay, first of all, who is Jeffrey King?
I'm a Vallejo native. I went to Vallejo Public Schools. I went to Vallejo Parent Nursery School, Cave, Federal Terrace, Vallejo Junior, Hogan High, Diablo Valley College. Went to Berkeley, stuck around nearby for law school. I'm a First Amendment lawyer by training, like First Amendment open government lawyer, which is sort of why I think how I kind of got the idea to do public records requests is kind of a initial tactic, if not strategy. And then I moved into press freedom. So I've basically spent the last 10 years of my life doing, protecting other journalists from digital, physical threats from state and non-state actors. But yeah, I'm a local kid. I teach privacy law class at Cal. I'm basically do nothing but civil liberties work, First Amendment work, press freedom work. So just thought hopefully I could be useful.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. That's an impressive resume you got there.
What was your life like growing up out here in Vallejo? Like, where are you from out here? What part of Vallejo are you from? What was life like?
So I actually grew up over off of Springs Road for the first 10 years of my life. Not so fun fact, Sean Kenny bought the house I grew up in.
Oh, wow.
The house that, I mean, these are the kind of things when you learn when you're doing all this research, right? And going deep on these things is, the house where I was like a little bitty baby getting bathed in the sink, in the kitchen sink, or where I lost my first tooth, or where I had my third birthday. Yeah, that guy bought the house I grew up in.
Wow.
But then my folks moved to be closer to my grandma and sort of in the States part of the V. So over kind of near the Heritage District. Yeah, but what was it like? It was great. I mean, I think one of the things that was interesting, like when I went to law school, was I went to school, very nice people, really cool people, but my experience was so much richer, I think, growing up. Like I really feel very lucky to be from Vallejo. There's something to be said for growing up wealthy and growing up going to prep schools and stuff, but it just, I mean, this place shaped me, and yeah, it was a good childhood.
I think that's something for a lot of successful people that come out of Vallejo, is that Vallejo got them to that success. At least I believe that. Like, we have so much creatives coming from Vallejo and so much great artists, and not only artists, but like even political activists and any type of politics. We have great people coming from not only Vallejo, but the Bay Area. So I think that is something to be noted.
Yeah, and I just want to say right off the bat, Open Vallejo started as an experiment, but it's, it is and is going to continue to grow into a full-fledged news organization. And one of the things, we're not going to be covering probably, we're not going to be cutting ribbon cutting ceremonies where, you tear down something and build a parking lot. Like, that's not our thing, but we're going to be doing investigative work and explanatory journalism and really hard-hitting stuff mostly, which is mostly going to be bad news. Is mostly going to be really depressing. Like, there are things that we have not published that we're working on that are going to horrify people, that are hard to even work on. At the same time, I just want to note right off the bat, I also want to create a space where people in the community can be heard. So like letters to the editor, op-eds, and also to celebrate that artistic and creative freedom. So we want to lift up and put a light on and shine on people who are, I mean, there's such incredible talent that came out of here and comes out here and will come out of here. So we definitely want to, that's like an exception to the, like, it's all bad news part of things. It's, we definitely want to treat Vallejo like it matters, and like the people who live here
Yeah,
matter.
for sure. I am exactly the same way. And I know, as you know, with my videos, same thing. So we'll talk about that later though.
All right. All right.
Yeah. Growing up, did you have like any master teachers or any big influences out here?
Yeah. My parents were really lovely. They're both dead. My mom was a cancer nurse over at Kaiser Vallejo. My dad was a union guy, worked for the railroad. They were lovely people. And beyond them, I mean, yeah, I had some amazing teachers. My 5th grade teacher, Mr. Kleine, over Federal Terrace, that guy, is still one of the most influential educators of my life. I remember, I mean, he would give us like these provocative prompts as like 11-year-olds about the First Amendment and hate speech and potentially subversive speech, and should this be protected? Is this covered by the Constitution? I'm like a little 10, 11-year-old. I'm like, yeah, it's covered. Like, that person sucks, but yeah, it's covered. So I mean, that learning about human rights and civil rights as a kid, not only from my parents but from some of these teachers, yeah, that definitely impacted me. Yeah, Maureen Mitchell-Weiss, her 8th grade English classes where I read A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest J. Gaines, right? A local hero. I don't know if folks had a chance to read the piece that Professor Lillian Brown, who's a Gaines scholar in Florida, wrote for Open Vallejo. It's still on the website, openvallejo.org. But this is beautiful essay about Gaines. He was a celebrated author. He was given his national, I want to say, Arts and Humanities Medal by President Obama. But he was a little boy growing up in deep Louisiana in the 40s. And when he hit 15, he was no longer allowed to go to the library. He's no longer allowed to go to school. So he moved out here. And he spent a lot of time in the Vallejo Library. And he wrote his first novel here. And I just think that's amazing and incredible. And that, why is 400 Mare Island Way, which is mostly glass anyway, make a very good library versus like the actual library, which is brick and steel, which would make a good police station comparatively? Why is that not the Ernest J. Gaines Memorial Library? Why is it not a regionally renowned library? Why does it not have, a civil rights, dedicated civil rights researcher and a critical race theory section? Why is it not, why are we not getting grants for that kind of thing? Why are we, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, not my journalist hat. But anyway, yeah, yes. To go back to your question, the teachers here shaped me as much as anybody ever did later in my life.
Definitely.
Okay, you say you went to college and stuff. What were you like back then? Like, were you partying in college, or were you a nerd? Like, what were you doing? Like, who was Jeffrey King in college?
The little nerd emoji, right? The little yeah, it's me. It's still me. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. Just probably the same person I am now. Probably a little more awkward. Yeah, no, not a lot of partying, but not like, I don't know. I wasn't like in the library all the time. But so that's another thing. Like when I went up to law school, it's kind of like I had a perspective of, oh wow, this is not expected of me. Like, this is not something that now I have more to prove. It was just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna, just kind of enjoy it and be friends with people and do the work and learn. But I don't know, it just kind of gave me a good grounding, I guess.
Mhm.
Get from here.
So why investigative journalism? What inspired you to do that, and specifically for Vallejo?
This place. Um,
Yep.
I worked in international human rights prior to doing this, protecting journalists in situations like Syria, Vietnam, where they're heavily surveilled and sometimes picked up and put in jail, and other places where they get trolled on the internet, but maybe don't get beat up or jailed that often. And other places where they just get straight up murdered. And I ran a technology program globally around journalist security, and particularly digital security, and kind of trying to help get folks who are not technically hardcore, but are just thoughtful professionals just trying to do their thing and live their life, trying to keep them safer. I am not comparing this place to Russia,
Yeah.
but some of the tactics I see from the Vallejo City government remind me of when I worked at an international human rights organization where I was working on petty dictatorship suppression of speech. There's clearly something deeper going on here, but just when I started looking into it, so I was back here. Let me back up. My mom was sick. She was dying of Alzheimer's, and I was spending more time here. And what I was reminded of was how amazing this community is. And what I realized was how messed up the government is here. I'm used to, living in San Francisco. Like, one of my good friends ended up on the board of supervisors. Another good friend is, my San Francisco supervisor. Wonderful person who cares. And, I think that's what it takes. It takes heart. Like, more than anything else, it takes caring about this place. And I don't see a lot of that. So specifically, what unnerved me, so the David McLaughlin viral videos that came out, Officer McLaughlin pulling a gun on Santiago Hutchins, and also giving a concussion to Adrian Burrell for exercising his First Amendment right under Fordyce versus City of Seattle, Ninth Circuit, to film the police. That caught my attention. I'd already seen the Angel Bagos beating outside Mod Pizza. And then Willie McCoy was the turning point for me. Willie McCoy was, I think, the turning point for people inside the police department who saw it as essentially an execution. And from there, yeah, I just started filing records requests. I will say my training is as an advocate, right? I was a First Amendment litigator, at the beginning of my career. I was actually filing cases against, my first one was against CIA. I had one I helped out on against the FBI, protecting people's free speech rights when they were sued for speaking out, protecting journalists who'd been illegally messed with by the authorities. But what I saw was, I spent a lot of time thinking about advocacy versus pure journalism. I've kind of been in the journalism world the entire time, but haven't done this full time. And it just seemed like the level of misinformation and disinformation, like the deliberate lying and malfeasance and illegal activity just wasn't being uncovered. And so I figured, look, I know a bunch of journalist friends, I can fundraise, I can learn how to build a website. So I started out kind of sourcing friends of mine and doing research and kind of being almost like a second journalist, just kind of like handing him stuff. So for example, Sean Kenny, I stumbled across the fact that he has a tactical training firm And then I, gave it to another journalist. But at the end of the day, like, they have other stuff to cover, and Vallejo just has so much need. So that's what we decided to do.
Okay. And can you tell us about some of your accomplishments and what made you who you are today? I like your coffee mug too.
Thank you. This is, so you asked me the nerdy thing. So this is Mac Dre, but made out of the text of the Freedom of Information Act. And I did not make this I made this like 10 years ago. That's how, that's how nerdy I am. I actually have done a lot of actually significant public records research on him and kind of what happened to him too. So someday, after I'm done writing the Vallejo corruption book, I want to write something about that for real. Like I really do. I think he was retaliated against for exercising his First Amendment rights. In particular, when he put out Punk Police, that's when they came down really, really hard on him. So yeah, Andrew Badu, former police chief, you asked about accomplishments. He was going to retire on April 31st of last year, or 30th, and then start on May 1st, go from police chief to interim chief, doing the exact same job, exact same guy, exact same responsibilities. However, he was going to retire from his $20,000 a month job, plus benefits, great benefits, full health coverage, to retire and then start drawing his nearly $20,000 a month pension while also earning $20,000 a month as interim chief on a contract for, I think it was up to 6 months, help handpick his successor, police chief, and pull 40 grand a month doing that, plus benefits, except the benefits would switch from the city to CalPERS. Andrew Badu was retiring under scandal, right? He was retiring after the William McCoy video came out that we got out. So that was another one. And so figured that out, gave it to Otis Taylor, my dude over the Chronicle, and ended up on the front page. And then all of a sudden turned out, well, somebody found out that Badu couldn't do that. It was actually not allowed under the CalPERS rules. We've gotten a number, and I have mixed feelings about this, but we've gotten a number of the shooting videos out. Those are hard because they cause a lot of pain. They're very difficult to watch. I don't recommend most folks watching them. They're really horrifying, but it's necessary, I think, work. And so with William McCoy, which was the first one, the city repeatedly denied the public records requests I filed, 3 or 4 of them. But Councilmember Brown said at a town hall that he had seen the footage. And under a case called Black Panther Party versus Kehoe from the 70s, that is a waiver of any exemptions, any withholdings under the California Public Records Act. It just waives it. That's it. One person sees it who doesn't, because he wasn't acting in sort of an official capacity. They didn't convene the full council in closed session, anything like that, where they could have continued to keep it hidden. From the video, it seems like he just kind of went to the cops and said, hey, I want to see it. Well, that's the same as you or I doing that. And so because the same as you or I are doing that, you and I can now see it. It's a waiver under the Public Records Act. So that came out. I think that had a big impact. And then Badu, we also uncovered that the former city attorney, Claudia Quintana, had sent what are called ex parte communications to actually all of the judges of the Solano County Superior Court. So one-sided communications as she was prosecuting people criminally. And that is just a fundamental breach of what our justice system is supposed to do. It's supposed to be two-sided, fair, in theory, but both sides have to be in front of the judge. You can't go to the judge. It's like going to the umpire and being like, hey, can you call this thing as a, as not a foul, so it's a home run, you know, for little Billy. Like you can't do that. Judges can't take sides. And the presiding judge at the time, John Ellis, very much felt that way about that fundamental ethical rule, and wrote back to the city attorney and reminded her of her ethical responsibility. Anyway, she retired 5 years early at a big knock to her pension after that. So that was one of our other ones. So, you know, those were some early ones. And then of course we did the badge story that I wrote about Vallejo police spending their badges after fatal shootings. We'll
That
see what impact that has.
that was really a big thing, I think, for everyone in Vallejo. I was shook. Like that was crazy to me.
Me too.
I can only imagine. And I feel like it was really necessary as well, because I think a lot of people like to push it under the rug and say like, oh, it's not a big deal because they help us with the sideshows. It's like that's beyond that. Like I feel like that cancels a lot of things that VPD does that are good. That just cancels all of it, because that is like ongoing and internal, like mega internal.
Covered up at the highest levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing when I was writing it, is I had never seen, there have been a handful of these stories. And in fact, like right around the time mine came out, one came out about LAPD SWAT. And there have also been ones about LA sheriffs gangs. I'd never seen one where there was readily available photographic evidence, both from like the VPD Facebook page, but also I went and made photographs at the new chief swearing in, city council meetings, which of course I have First Amendment right to do, as does anybody else. And if they want to send us pictures of officers wearing metal badges, and we'll take a look, because it's very subtle, but I've sort of seen so many that I can tell pretty quickly. You can just email tips@openvallejo.org or openvallejo@protonmail.ch. Send us your pictures of officers, and we'll set up a form too, to make it easy. But there's a couple things about it. I think it takes away the argument that these shootings, which statistically are anomalous as fuck, like the number of shootings by Vallejo police, off the charts, way higher than LAPD in terms of per capita rate, way higher than Oakland.
Say it louder.
These are the masters of misconduct out here.
Vallejo, yeah, but like bumbling, like bumbling misconduct. I mean, but it's not, you can't say that it's anything but the department culture if you have an at least, and stay tuned, at least 20-year ritual or close to it. But I think it goes back a lot farther.
Yeah.
They don't shoot nearly at the rate that Oakland does, Oakland cops. Is Vallejo so much different from Oakland? Like, does Vallejo have so much more sophisticated crime? Do we have so many more guns? You know, so much more, so many drugs like moving around? Come on. Compared to Oakland, compared to San Francisco, compared to San Jose, you know, compared to LA, like other places have, you know, things that people are involved in things. And I just think that, you know, VPD acts like or the city acts like this is some lawless state. Compared to other places, it's, the main difference is that those places don't shoot people like this. So most cops in their entire career, I'm talking like 3/4 of cops anywhere in the country, any stage of their career, according to Pew Research, a Pew Research poll from 2016, never fire their weapon in the line of duty, other than in training or to qualify, the marksmanship qualification. Never. Like 3/4 of them. And I'm pretty sure that counts like shooting at a charging dog or anything. The records that we have, that we were able to get, are only about discharging a firearm at another human being. And there are officers there are a ton of them with 2 shootings each, including in just a few years since getting here from, like, say, Oakland. after Oakland was put under federal oversight, 3 shootings each, 4 shootings each. There are multiple cops on VPD, a force of, around 100 with 4 shootings each. So it just that alone is astounding, and kind of figuring that out and surfacing that. But then with the ritual, it's just something else.
Yeah.
It's just something else. And I do want to say something that I try and say in every interview I do. I recognize that policing I'm a civil liberties lawyer by training, right? So I recognize that policing is a really challenging public policy problem in America. It is a racism problem. It's a systemic racism problem. It is, traces directly back to slavery. So within those caveats, I want to say that I do think that there are some good people in the Vallejo Police Department, like good individual human beings. And I think there are good people working in the city. However, those people get shit on. And they're not in control.
The next question.
Okay, and the people want to know, especially me, I want to know what exactly is Open Vallejo? Like, what consists of Open Vallejo?
Yeah, so we are a news organization, but we're also part of a larger organization that I founded called the Informed California Foundation. The idea is Vallejo is essentially a laboratory, and Open Vallejo is like a design lab for trying to figure out what works here. So this is probably as bad as any situation. If folks are familiar with the scandal in Bell, California, a number of years ago, where the FBI raided City Hall, and it was a bunch of city officials paying themselves hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for no good reason, combined with Kern County law enforcement, which is terrifying law enforcement. They're very scary down there. I sort of describe Vallejo as Bell, California, plus Kern County, with Kern County's law enforcement, if it had Kern County's law enforcement. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this place, we're going to shake it, we're going to turn upside down, shake it, see what falls out, lift up every rock. There is really no, I want it so it's a completely hostile environment to corruption. I want to make it so not only are the folks in government and the police department and the school district and anywhere else in the government, including regionally, not only are they either are misdeeds exposed and there's impact and consequences and accountability for that, but whatever next wave of people comes in, next wave, they know that they have to be careful. And maybe they just think, you know what, this is not worth it. I want to turn Vallejo into a model, open, transparent, ethical city. I know that's aspirational, but that's the goal. But the bigger goal too, and as if that's not enough work, is the nonprofit, the larger nonprofit, is to look at what we're doing really carefully and thoughtfully and critically, self-critically, figure out what's working, figure out what does not work that well, figure out where we're fucking up, but try and take the stuff that works, that can be kind of universalized and distilled, and try and package that into kind of modules and models. So I'm talking Public Records Act trainings, Brown Act trainings, an app or even a poster you could put up in a newsroom or in your office that's like, here's a flow chart of the Brown Act. And if they say this, then, well, maybe you can respond with that. And just so people understand it, because it's there for the people, right? It's there for, these are the mechanisms of our government. And one of the more radical things I've ever read, at least recently, is actually the preamble to the Brown Act, which guarantees open meetings. It's basically, it sounds like some militia statement. It's like, this is the people's government and we're just loaning the power, but it's true, right? So, we want to do technical interventions where we're scraping public records and then building databases that can be, accessed for research, for journalistic and academic research. Make those campaign filing campaign filings easy to access and read. Make infographics so you don't have to read a 50-page PDF, after you've come off a long shift or you've commuted back from working in San Francisco or Oakland or Sacramento. A People's J School, so folks can do their own journalism, in a way that could get picked up by other nonprofit media. So the idea is we want to make modules basically as a sort of a public health model, and then not say, okay, now we're coming to save the day, or, we're not, but just here's what worked for us. Let us know what additional support you need. So anybody can do it. If you're in Kern, if you're in Compton, if you're in Reading, if you're in, Oakland and you feel that something's not getting covered, or Napa, or American Canyon, Fairfield, right?
I feel like there's a lot of Napa that needs to be spoken about as well. And so you said that you want this to be, well, it is bigger, but you also want it, your intention is to have it as like news reporting as well. Do you intend on having it go in the direction that Black Zebra is doing? Like, are you familiar with Black Zebra from Sacramento?
Yeah, no, they do great work. Great work.
They really do. Is that something that you're interested in and trying to do that type of documentation?
Like live streaming and
Yeah, like how they go to certain places and they live stream the whole, protesting and stuff. Like they're doing that right now.
yeah.
Is that something you're interested in?
So I actually got my start covering protests. The Iraq War was sort of bubbling up. It hadn't started yet when I was an undergrad at Berkeley, and Berkeley's a protesty kind of town. And the first thing I ever covered, I'm mostly a photographer. Oh, by the way, this is a FBI surveillance photograph of the free speech movement in 1964. I got it from a Freedom of Information Act request. So I've actually covered a lot of protests. I covered the Oscar Grant uprising. I covered Occupy Oakland. Like I've gotten tear gassed, probably by some of the cops who then came to Vallejo. I mean, I have pictures of some of these guys from Oakland from a decade ago. I got a picture of Robert DeMarco, who's shattered a man's arms with his collapsible baton in Vallejo to the point where he broke his metal baton. Those things are marketed as, quote, virtually indestructible, end quote. There have been some cops who come from Oakland to Vallejo, but I've been covering protests for a long time. I've covered also a lot of peaceful protests. I think that live streaming is really valuable. I also think that Black Zebra Productions does it better than almost anybody I've ever seen. And I thought it was so cool when they were getting messed with when they kind of first started in Sacramento, or at least when I first saw them.
Yeah.
And the Sacramento Bee was like, here's a press credential from our newsroom. Here are business cards. Like they paid to have them made up because the cops are like, you're not real news.
Yeah.
Guess what? Everybody's real news. So in terms of us doing that, I think we have, limited resources that we want to focus on digging up the investigative stuff. I definitely want to have a really amazing visual team. So I was just talking to my buddy Alex Welsh, who's shot for like Fader, and he did like the best portrait of Anthony Bourdain I've ever seen. He did amazing, beautiful long-term documentary work in Bayview Hunters Point, like right when that gentrification fight was like really, really happening, like really hot. Have you all ever heard of Magnum Photos? Yeah, it's like a niche kind of thing, but it's like every iconic photograph you can think of, from like Malcolm X in profile to Tiananmen Square tank man standing against the tanks to like Marilyn Monroe to like Che Guevara that you see on the t-shirts in Berkeley. That's all Magnum Photos. And so there's a Magnum Photos photographer who lives here, Carolyn Drake, who's just like one of the greatest photographers in the world. She's contributing work. So I think we probably want to focus on investigative and explanatory journalism, but we definitely want a strong visual component. And we also want to work with people who, there's a lot of talented people here and elsewhere in the Bay. So we want to provide a platform for people. We also want to pay and treat people fairly. That's something that's really important to me. Having sort of been in the nonprofit sector for most of my career, there are a lot of pluses, but I think that we really want to try and live our values too. So, also when people do freelance for us, we want to not be jerks.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a good plan though. And I think where you guys have started is a really great start, because I think getting the nitty gritty and the inside details of everything is very important. And you have plenty of time to have people go out and document, live events and stuff like that. So it's definitely, it seems like something easy to work up to, because I feel like you guys started where it would be more difficult to do.
It takes a lot of resources. You're out there for hours and hours and hours. Brian Krantz, though, who does our podcast, I mean, he's out there for hours. I've been out there for hours taking pictures. I think that also people will just do that naturally, right? As we all build community around shared values of openness and human dignity, human life, freedom, art, all the good stuff, love. For real, like as we build those values together as a community, people will just be naturally doing what they're really good at anyway. And what I'd like to see is like, we're kind of like a big old wrecking ball, but other people can build something beautiful out of that. And, we can help, but like we're busy being a wrecking ball. So yeah, I'd like to see everybody just kind of participating in democracy as much as like maximally as much as is possible.
Okay. Yeah. As a journalist, like, what are some of the most high-ranking stories you put out? Because I know the badge. I mean, do you think the badge bending is the most high-ranking, or which one would you say is the most high-ranking story you put out?
Yeah, that one's I think a 4-star general. In terms of rank, like I've never done anything like that. I've written long investigative pieces, but I think the badge story kind of takes the cake. And we've got some follow-ups coming. I know it's been a little bit since we've had like major new content on the site, and that's because after the badge story came out, there was a lot of press. So, it ended up in the New York Times and CNN and the Guardian and all that, but then I was doing a lot of interviews, and then we started doing fundraising, applying for grants. So we got a bunch of new stuff coming soon, and it's gonna knock. Like it's gonna be big.
That specific story was so revealing. Like that completely exposed so much, and it was so revealing that it was almost like I wasn't supposed to know any of that. Like it almost.
Oh, you were not.
Why am I reading this? Like that was crazy. It was so revealing that it was almost insane.
Yeah, you definitely were not supposed to know any of that. Neither was I. And the fact that, there were cops in VPD who have killed people who didn't know about it. There was somebody asked me in an interview once, and I think it was a good question, and it's something I thought about a lot when I was writing it. Well, what if this is some way of marking the profound tragedy of taking a life, because it shapes you forever, just like for sake of argument. Because it's actually very much like a tear tattoo or like a spider web. It's like it seems a lot more like an initiation. But what if this is something to kind of say, this is something that changed me forever. I'll never forget it. And I kept an open mind about that, just because I have to in this role. But they're throwing parties.
Yeah,
they're getting drunk and throwing parties and cooking tri-tip.
Yeah, there's a difference between memorial and celebration. Like,
and then you look at the numbers, right? The biggest thing that law enforcement sources were concerned about was the incentives it creates.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go get my bend. Right?
Yeah.
The McCoy shooters, 2 of them were 7 months on the force. 2 of them were 18 months on the force. One was a like 13-year veteran, Mark Thompson, who's has a pretty controversial career, including another killing. He's the guy who says, if he reaches for it, you know what to do. And another one had 4 years on the force. So if statistically 75% or 73% of officers anywhere in the country, big town, small town, you know, high crime rate, low crime rate, whatever, never fire the weapon at all, and you've got these guys kind of crowding around a car, that kind of I think that's what stood out to particularly law enforcement sources. They're like, what reward system is this creating?
Yeah.
Okay. When you put out these prolific stories, like, do you ever feel like your life is in danger? Like, you could be potentially hurting a corrupt department or whatever?
I've taken on bigger bullies.
Oh, damn. He said,
The first case I filed was against the CIA. I mean, come on. But no, I mean, yeah, it's real. It's real. I take precautions. But again, my entire career so far has been in protecting journalists. Yeah. I literally work for the Committee to Protect Journalists for 3.5 years. I've headed up the Society of Professional Journalists Freedom of Information Committee. I know everybody. I know people in federal law enforcement. You know, one of the things about going to law school is you got a nice network, right? I know people in local law enforcement. I know people in state law enforcement. I know all the civil rights lawyers. I know all the press people. So nothing's guaranteed. I could go out to the grocery store and catch COVID and die. I could go out to the grocery store and some guy could shoot me. But it would turn out poorly for them. I have a First Amendment right. You have a First Amendment right to speak out on matters of public concern. That's what this is guaranteed by the Constitution. Yeah. And I mean, I literally have one on my desk. Well, I guess it's, there you go. Well, little hip little designy Constitution. Like, yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to formulate. I hope for their sake they're not that dumb. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because yeah, there would be significant consequences for any sort of retaliation. You know, I've gotten threats. I know who they're from. They don't think I know, but I know a lot. And yeah, it's just a bad idea. It's a bad idea to do it to anybody, right? That's one of the things that pissed me off the most and really spurred this was grieving families being harassed. Are you kidding me? People who speak up at city council meetings, people who say something on Nextdoor getting harassed. There are over 24 fake public records requests, supposedly from Open Vallejo, plagiarizing our request language, which, you know, it's fine. It's cobbled together. It's sort of practical language, but taking great pains to sound like it's written in the tone that we do, just harassing Vallejoans and journalists. Mm-hmm. And I would bet you dollars to donuts that's from somebody or somebody's in the city government. And I think folks are just used to not ever having any consequences.
Yeah. I mean, you have your resources. So if anything were to go down, then you're pretty much set. So we have like a couple more questions before we.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an officer who wrote a letter saying Open Vallejo basically lies and spreads false information that cripples the city. But then that same officer turned around and got put on leave for destroying evidence in the Sean Monterosa case. What happened with that? Like, was y'all the ones who got him investigated? Was that y'all?
No, he did that to himself.
Oh, damn.
And just for the record, that officer is Lieutenant Michael Nicolini. Michael Walter Niccolini, he is a member of the Vallejo Command staff, as, by the way, are a number of the badge benders, our sources tell us. And just as a quick aside, Lieutenant, he was a sergeant at the time, but he got promoted by Chief Williams. Lieutenant Steve Darden wore what appears to be a bent badge to Chief Williams swearing in, and then Chief Williams promoted him. I believe he's still on the street. He's still, I believe, a watch commander, or at least a high-ranking officer in the city. So far, I haven't seen a whole lot of movement on this stuff in terms of reform or fixing anything, but we'll see. Yeah, so Lieutenant Michael Niccolini is the head of the Vallejo Police Officers Association, the Vallejo Police Union. He is, last I checked, on administrative leave in connection with the alleged destruction of the windshield in the Sean Monterosa shooting, as is the investigations lieutenant, Fabio Rodriguez. There is a criminal investigation into that destruction of evidence by the state attorney general. And Michael Niccolini, just so you know, was hired here in, I want to say 08, might have been 06, I think it's 08. While his father, Robert Niccolini, was the chief of Vallejo Police, Robert Niccolini had been the deputy chief of Oakland. He came here in the mid-90s, and that's actually when you start to see an uptick in officers transferring from Oakland. And then when Oakland goes under federal oversight, you see a bunch too. We'll have a story on that fairly soon. Sort of the migration patterns of the Vallejo police officer, if you will, like an Audubon Society map almost. How do they move around? We have that data. But so his dad was the Chief Niccolini, and two complaints were sustained for excessive force against his son. Basically, it seems like very similar instance to what happened to Carlos Yescas, getting ripped out of his car. One was at a sideshow, I believe, and then there was another one too, and just jacked people up, young men of color out of their cars. So there are two sustained complaints in less than a year. He'd also been sued before. I do have to give Michael Niccolini credit, though, for one thing. That is, Oakland has a really good crowd control policy that has significant protections for journalists, and they don't necessarily always follow it, but on paper, it's really good because it was written by the ACLU and the National Lawyers Guild. As a settlement that came out of a protest where, among other things, Lieutenant Niccolini was using his, allegedly using his Harley to bump people, this multi-100-pound Harley, which is now banned under the policy. So at least, I mean, that's one upside. But basically, he had a pretty controversial career in Oakland, and then came here while his dad was chief. And so that's, I just want people to know like who we're talking about.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have two questions that I'm going to try to put into one question so we can save some time. What goes through your head when you see the mayoral candidate signs being vandalized, being torn, when you see harassment that some specific supporters for certain candidates are going through, and this very, very apparent divide? I mean, it's going to be the same thing as like Republican versus Democrat, but it's like the divide between the two candidates, it's so stark and it's so much. What is your opinion about the vandalism, the harassment, and the divide? And on top of that, how do you think this candidacy is going to end up? Who do you think is going to be the winner, I guess, at the end of this? And I'll add on one more to that. If you don't mind revealing, who do you endorse? We'll say that.
So I will speak entirely in my personal capacity rather than on behalf of Open Vallejo Reform California. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, so we are actually barred by federal law from participating in any way in electoral politics. We are allowed, obviously, to write factual, critical articles about people who may be running for office, or it's just basically doing news. But we are not allowed to endorse. And I think I will refrain from doing that personally as well. I think that I think I'm gonna balk here. I think that here's what I'll say, and it's gonna be a non-answer, but at least I'm being honest about it. I think that people should have all of the information, the newsworthy information about anybody running for office or anybody in office. They need to create a fully formed decision on their own about that candidate. That's our job, is to focus on giving people the information they need to make those decisions in a fully formed, fully informed manner. So that's why, in part, other than the IRS rules, we stay sort of out of politics. What we're trying to focus on is just kind of the basic human sanctity of life and human dignity and democracy angle. So right now, Vallejo does not appear to be a democracy. That anybody, whether it's police, whether it's candidates or their supporters, whether it's people in City Hall, the idea that any government official or candidate would feel free to engage in intimidation or harassment is inviting scrutiny upon themselves. And I think that, our role is to just tell the truth about anybody, period. So we look at all of them. We look at claims that, if there's a credible claim about any of them, we'll look into them. But we already have. We've been looking for a year, and we kind of know. We know what is to be found to some extent, and we're just going to keep putting out facts.
Yeah.
Okay, and these are the last set of questions. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. These are the fun questions.
All right.
The regular interview. This isn't the hot seat. I'm gonna cool it down for you.
It's like a mixtape. That's great.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a well-crafted DJ set.
Boom. Nations of Buds.
Wait, what's that?
Nations or Buds Burgers.
Oh, come on, man.
Ah.
No, not hard. Come on, man. Like, just that's obvious. Buds is the hometown favorite. Like, I gotta be loyal to my soil. Like, Nations is regional. It's close. It's starting in the Bay Area, right? Or LA maybe, but it's big and come on. You gotta hit me a little harder than that. But actually, I stopped eating meat last year, so I can't go to Buds anymore.
That's fair.
But Buds for sure. That's where I grew up. I grew up on the Buds on Springs Road. That's how Vallejo I am.
Okay. I guess I can skim right past this question because I see your cup. It was Mac Dre at E40, unless you got a sub.
I'm not a partisan. I'm not trying to get involved in I have a lot of respect for the hillside. I try and rep Vallejo. Period. Yeah, I think that's probably the right answer. But I have a few Mac Dre t-shirts.
Okay. Martin Luther King or Malcolm X?
Yes. Yes.
Both of them?
I mean,
which one out of the two would you say would be the best one?
I think that I'm sorry, I can't choose. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Korematsu, all of them. It's a movement.
That is a hard question to answer because they do well in different aspects. Like they achieve the same goal, but in very different ways.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the movement would be my answer. I'm sorry, I'm wriggling out a little bit, but this is about everyone, and including the people that we don't know about. I mean, yeah, this is about everybody.
Well, which approach then? Which approach would you take? The Malcolm X approach or the Martin Luther King approach?
Um, I think both. I think different tactics and different approaches. You know, I think that I'm probably pretty like seem pretty milquetoast, but like I think what we're doing is pretty radical, right? I've never broken a window like some like the anarchist kids, but you know, we're also exposing things that are pretty wild. So yeah, just a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll. I don't know. Like, yeah, I'll say this, not the fake Martin Luther King that people think is Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. King was radical, right? Dr. King was not what people say, to the point where every year in my privacy law class, I actually there was a letter that it turns out the head of like domestic intelligence for the FBI wrote a poison pen letter it was not signed. It's the same shit that we're seeing here in some ways, saying it was leaked tapes of him having affairs with people from them bugging his hotel rooms and saying, you should just kill yourself. Like this whole letter is available now and is real. It was in the Senate hearings, the COINTELPRO hearings. And there's actually a less redacted version that got found by a scholar at Yale. Like, if you were pissing off the powers of the be that much, you know, you're doing something more than the kind of caricature that is presented of Dr. King. So I just think that it's not my place to make those calls because I think that these are struggles for self-determination that I can attempt through my actions to be an ally. But at the end of the day, I think that it's kind of hard for me to choose.
Yeah.
I do have a Mac Dre mug.
All right, and this is the last one of this little interview. This is a smooth one. A day on the beach or a night out on the town?
I mean, these days, neither. I'd say probably a night on the town, but actually, I think like a hike in the woods sounds good too. That's nice, just like real quiet and yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess this concludes this little interview.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. King. If you have any links to anything, like I know you mentioned a link earlier for the community to send you information. If you'd like to send that to me, we can post it with the video. Any other links or resources that you want us to have or that you want the community to have, send it our way so we can also post it with video. I guess that wraps it up for us. Is there any last thing you'd like to say?
Just thank you. This is an honor, and I think that things are going to change around here, and it's not going to change because of us. It's going to change because of all of us. And it's really amazing to see so many people in so many ways step up and speak for justice. So thanks.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We really want to have these informed people talk to us and inform the rest of the population of Vallejo. So we really care, and we really appreciate that you really care, especially enough to have Open Vallejo and give us all this information. So thank you so much for giving us your time today and your energy and your answers and your honesty. And we will see you around.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go write a hopefully fairly devastating investigative piece. We'll see.
Oh no.
All right. Yeah.
Take care. Thank you.